Even if it's, I don't know, like making a cafe or making a lemonade stand. I prefer to be like making things and selling them rather than like writing code for some like huge company. My third month, I made something like $2,500. By month 3, I was already like, okay, this is good, this is working, so I'll just keep on going from there. You have to see if there's demand. One way of doing that is obviously see if something like this exists already and see if you can like make a better version of it. No one goes into a cafe and says like, how dare you open this cafe? There's a cafe down the street. You're copying this. I don't think there's anything wrong in going into an area where there's already products. And I think that's probably the safest way.
Hi everybody, welcome back to Ship It and Sip It. Pete, thank you so much for joining the show this week. And as always, we'll start with our first question. What did you ship recently that folks should check out?
Cool. Thanks a lot for having me. I've just updated my landing page for my newsletter, High Signal. So that's a newsletter where I basically share like the best of the kind of indie hacker and Bootstrap news. And I made a new landing page and it's going really well. I've added a bunch of testimonials from founders like Rob Walling and Harry Dry and Justin Jackson, people like that. And yeah, that's been going well. Honestly, there's a big change in the newsletter signups. I guess like a lot of newsletters, you go on and there's like a forum at the top, but then there's like the rest of the blog and the newsletter. And I changed it to be a kind of like a hard stop. So when you come to highsignal.io, there's literally just a sign up page. And then you join the newsletter, and then obviously you get lots of good content from there. So if anyone has a newsletter, I'd recommend doing this kind of like one page because it just makes people take one action instead of like, oh, I'm going to check out your blog. And then, you know, people get distracted. They want to see a cat video or something, and then they leave your site and then they don't sign up. So that's the thing I've shipped most recently.
Very cool. Yeah, I went to the website and I signed up, but honestly, I really wanted to read like one or two editions of it. Like I was looking for an archive all over the site. So I know it works, but I don't know. What do you think about that?
Maybe I'll A/B test it. I had a really good chat. So I live in Edinburgh in Scotland, and I had a really good chat with another founder recently. He runs a job board. And he also works for this company, PostHog. I think I said it right. And it's like an A/B testing company. So he just does loves A/B testing. So I should probably test this rather than figure it out than just guess. I totally get your argument, and I know a lot of people do like that. But I've looked at a lot of the like really big newsletters in like I know marketing newsletters or founder newsletters. And a lot of them do go for this like hard stop, but yeah, I should test it really just to see, because I can understand from your perspective as well.
Yeah, for sure. How often do you send those out?
I send out twice a week. I send out on Wednesday and Friday every week, like without fail, unless I'm on like vacation. And yeah, I think that's something that's really good about the newsletter, and I'd encourage other people to have like, if you want to start a newsletter, if you have one already, I really think it should be like a routine, because like, for instance, I was away over the summer on vacation, and I came back and I checked in with a couple of podcasts that I like, and like they hadn't published anything in a month. And it's kind of like, I know that people don't...
Guilty.
Sorry, man. Sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry. But you know what I mean? It's kind of like I know people don't read newspapers so much, but you wouldn't log on to like, I know, the New York Times or New York Post or whatever, and they'd be like, oh yeah, this news is from a week ago. We'll publish an update soon. And it's kind of like, I don't know. So I think if you have content, it's good to be regular. So I'm every Wednesday, every Friday. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I think we'll get into a little bit of the differences between the different formats of content later, but I guess if you had a blog, you could sort of pull off being more or less irregular.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's good to have a kind of just like a routine. So people, I like to think that people in my audience, I've got like about 1,300 people and I want to get a lot more people checking out newsletter. But I figure a lot of them are like, oh yeah, it's Wednesday. I should be expecting Pete's newsletter anytime soon. And I mean, there's so much competition for attention and, all over the internet. I think it's nice to have that kind of routine. I guess, it's a bit like, we're probably roughly of the same age. And I remember, I guess like back in the day, you'd have like, oh, Friends is on at 9 o'clock, every week without fail. Where, if you want to watch Friends, it's on a Friday, or Seinfeld or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I think there's just something good about having something on set days because it gets people into a habit, and then they're not just like, oh yeah, I wonder when that will come around again. If you see what I mean?
For sure. Mine was the X-Files on Sunday night. That was our jam when I was a kid.
Cool. Oh well, you can beat me in the kill points.
All right. I've noticed this trend, especially among sort of indie hackers or solo entrepreneurs, however you want to put it, where people coming from a technical background, developers, programmers, they get really excited about writing and marketing online after X number of years being sort of programmers. And they pivot almost totally away from coding. Is that what happened with you? It seems like that's what happened to you. Did this happen quickly? Am I off base?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the weird thing was I spent a couple of years learning to code myself. And during that time, I was really looking for like examples of other people that had learned without a college degree. And I started reaching out to friends that I'd kind of met in the indie hacker community. And I kind of wanted to put these stories together. So I made this website called nocsdegree.com. And I've interviewed like 200 people about learning to code since then. And I guess for me, we can get into it a bit, but I left my job, and I guess it's just a case of, well, this is what I'm working on in the moment, and this is what's working. I guess like in terms of what I like doing, I'd say, and my identity, I'd say I'm really a founder who can code rather than a developer full stop. Like if you had to make me choose between being a developer for like an insurance company or being a bootstrap founder, I'd be founder every time. Even, I don't know, even if it's, I don't know, like making a cafe or, I don't know, making a lemonade stand or, whatever. I prefer to be like making things and selling them rather than like, I don't know, writing code for some like huge company, for instance.
Got it. I think a lot of people feel that way, so it makes sense. I went through your About page. You have a nice short summary of your entrepreneurial journey there. And speaking of your job, you said, I quote, "I quit my lousy job in 2019," end quote. So I'm curious about this decision because I feel like there are quite a few people that may listen to this, may feel the same way that you did back then. So first of all, how long did that take? And did you have like some experiments that you were trying? Like, I want to get X amount of followers on Twitter, or I want to sell a course and see if this will actually work? Like, what were your benchmarks where you said, now I can quit my job and go do this full time?
I think I was quite lucky because I guess it doesn't sound lucky, but a lot of people that might be listening or are thinking of doing bootstrapping have like really huge, like 6-figure salaries, and maybe not everyone, but maybe a lot of them work for like, Apple or Amazon or something. They're paid like tons of money. I'm aware of like in the US, you have things like, healthcare costs and stuff. And you have these kind of like golden handcuffs where people are like, oh, well, how am I going to quit my 300 grand a year job in the Bay Area to bootstrap a product? I didn't have any of that. So I think it was kind of like a blessing. And honestly, I was kind of like, so I went to university a long time ago and I'd done a few office jobs, and I was kind of like, I'd moved back to my home city of Edinburgh, and I was kind of in between jobs, and I was just doing this terrible job in a bookies, like a bookmaker, like a betting shop, I guess.
Yeah.
It was wild. Like, I guess I'll try and think of like 3 examples to explain how wild it is. One person passed out. He was like a really like heavy set guy, shall we say? And like the ambulance crew were coming, and they're like, "Oh, you guys have to lift him up." And they're like, I'm not like waking up some like drunk guy who's like passed out. That's not gonna end well. I don't know. Like people would threaten you if you like. I guess with betting shops, a lot of the things they do, if they see someone that's like a new employee, they'll put a bet on just after the horse is left, and then they'll be like £10 on this guy or whatever, and they'll try to and you have your job is like no the race already started, etc. So people will try and trick you, and if there's lots of money at stake, it's a pretty like aggressive environment, and also like you'd have people like I don't know smoking drugs and stuff and hard drugs and stuff, and as so eventually I was just like I'm out of here. I don't want to like I can do a lot better than this, obviously. And in terms of metrics, I wanted to make like $1,000 a month within my first 6 months. And I had about 6 months of savings. And at that time, I had a pretty low cost of living situation in Edinburgh. Got a lot worse since then, but it's a pretty cheap place to live back then. And basically, I had 6 months. So I was kind of like, right, I'll just go straight into this. I'll make this website called No CS Degree. I'd been hanging about in like Telegram groups and Twitter and stuff for a while. And I think my third month, I made something like $2,500. So by month 3, I was already like, okay, this is good. This is working. So I'll just keep on going from there. And the last few years, I've had, I don't know, a lot of twists and turns, but I've managed to not go back to a job. So that's good.
Yeah, that's great. I think my only frame of reference for bookies and what they're like are from Guy Ritchie films. So that sounds pretty accurate, though.
Yeah, it was not not a fun time, but but the funny thing is, I passed that place quite a lot, and it actually shut down, and I'm still going. So every time I pass it, I'm like, Pete 1, betting shop 0.
Nice, nice. I'm curious how you landed on the platforms that you chose to write on. So what made you choose Twitter back in the day, and has your opinion of the platform changed over time?
I think for Twitter, I don't know. I didn't really put a lot of thought into it in the sense of it was just where everyone hung out in terms of like bootstrapping and indie hacking and stuff like that. It was just like the natural kind of place that's where I found people talking about starting their products and, getting into coding and stuff. It's just like a kind of natural place to go. I guess in a similar way, if you were like, in the same way that if you were like a travel photographer, Instagram would be the natural place to go. If you wanted to make like, I don't know, silly skits or something like that, TikTok or YouTube would be the way to go. That was and maybe still is the natural place to go. Yeah, Twitter's changed a lot in the last couple of years. Like a lot of people are leaving, so we can get onto this, I guess. But I mean, I'm a ghostwriter for people on a few different platforms, like Twitter and LinkedIn are my main ones. And in the same week that like lots of people are leaving Twitter, and I get that, I'm not opposed to people or doing that or whatever. I still get like a bunch of emails or DMs saying like, "Hey, I'm looking for a ghostwriter" on Twitter. So it's quite funny. I don't know. I think Twitter will always stick around as a place for founders and developers to be. It might not be the same kind of place that your mom like hangs out and writes messages, or it might not be the kind of same for like, I don't know, the everyday person. But I think for tech nerds and founders and people, I think it's got a pretty good like moat.
Okay, we'll get more into I guess your Twitter service and how you approach writing there in a second. But just to wrap up your backstory a little bit, I looked through the projects you've launched. You had a directory. I think Remote Companies was a directory, right?
Yeah, it was like a directory / job board. Yeah.
Okay. So a directory, a community that's still ongoing as far as I know, a podcast, a couple different services. Now you have a newsletter as well, but you never launched a SaaS product. Why was that?
Good question. Firstly, one little thing, the community actually stopped. So I don't have the community anymore. It's kind of like, well, yeah, it stopped. I still have basically a group of friends, but it's not a paid product or anything anymore. So, but in terms of why I've never done a SaaS, I've definitely thought about it. I guess the last few years, I've just been trying to really hustle and make a living. And I'm not saying, obviously you can make really good money with SaaS, but it's a real like long-term play. I mean, maybe it's different now with AI. And if I was to make, I have thought about doing a SaaS, I might make like some kind of like AI SaaS in the next year. It's a slow burn for revenue, but once it gets going, it's really good, and I appreciate that. But like, it's not unusual, maybe pre the AI era, to get like spend 12 months making your SaaS, and you get to like 1K MRR or 2K MRR, and that's like quite a good result. Whereas if you do something like services, if you know your stuff and if you've got a good offer, you could get to 1 to 2K MRR in like a week or a month, or, super quickly, I guess. So yeah, I think a SaaS would be something I do in the future, but I'm enjoying what I do at the moment.
What's your take? Because it seems like you try these projects and you give them like sort of a certain amount of runtime. You're pretty patient with these things. But what's your take on like the opposite end, the guys that are doing like a SaaS every week or 12 SaaS in 12 months, just sort of throwing products at the wall and seeing what sticks? Have you ever like wanted to take that approach?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I like that you call me patient. I would say maybe more stubborn. But it's one man's patience, another man's stubbornness. Look, it can be a good approach. Doing things like 12 startups, 12 months is really good for like to find out what works, and it kind of builds your like building muscle. So you get used to like building lots of things. So it's good for like cycling through ideas, and there are lots of people that have obviously had a lot of success with it. I guess what I'd say though is some people, I think, interpret it quite badly, because a lot of people think, oh, it means I have to run 12 startups at the same time, or, stuff like that. I think you can have too many things on the go. I don't think it's a great idea to be running like 6 different things. And maybe this is a case of like, do as I say, not as I do, because I do have a few things on the go. I don't know. I've got friends that are SaaS founders. Like my friend, like Amar, runs a SaaS called SendMade. It's really successful. It makes like, I think they're doing like a couple of mil in annual revenue. And he's not like, oh, I've got to keep 3 or 4 other things on the go just in case. He's
right.
Like most founders that have, if you hit a home run, you're not like, oh, well, I better work on some other things at the same time. It is good for trying new things. If you've never done something before, it's good. But also I'd say some ideas take a longer time. Sometimes you don't know. I think it really depends on the idea. Some ideas you do know in a month. Okay, no one's like, I pushed up a newsletter. I'm like hammering all over social. Like I put on Product Hunt. Nobody signed up for it. Yeah, maybe after a month you can give up on it, because maybe you tried everything. But there's lots of things that are like, for instance, like a marketplace, like a job board, takes longer to like build up steam. So some things you're not going to see a great signal on it in the first month, and you might quit too early.
All right, let's talk about getting started with things then. And I guess the first place we'll start, since you're a Twitter ghostwriter, is with Twitter. Say a founder comes to you to say, I want to get started on Twitter, but every time I open Twitter, I get distracted by crazy videos and arguments and topic of the day, and I waste my time. Let's start there. How do you advise people to sort of focus on the content that they want to put out and growing the audience that they want, instead of getting distracted by the madness?
Good question. I'd say probably like there's a few different things. I think one tip I did ages ago was, I can't remember exactly where you did it in your settings, but you can change like like the side on the right hand side of Twitter. You usually see like trending topics. You can, I think ages ago I changed the language of that to something like Japanese, or a language I didn't understand. So change it to German, and then you're going to see what's trending in Germany, but you're not going to get distracted by that, or Japan, or whichever country you don't speak their language. But I think like, I don't know, I think it's just the thing in general is you want to create more than you consume. And like, I'd say 99% of people on the internet are reading things and consuming things instead of creating things. So being aware of that and just finding good people to follow and engaging with them is important, but you've got to be saying things as well. And like, if I click on like someone's like profile on social media, and this kind of goes for any social media, if they've not posted in like a month or 3 months, or like they've done 3 updates in a year, I'm not going to follow them because they're not like an active person on here. So I think the first thing, if you've got like, say, writer's block, would just be like getting in the habit of just posting like once a weekday. And I think once you start posting, post on like maybe 2 or 3 different topics. So you might post about, I don't know, like growing your startup, how it's going so far, and I don't know, like technical advice or something. You can just like tweet on those 3 areas and see what works. Once you see that, like, if someone really likes the fact that you share your revenue update, which they probably will, because that's something that's popular on Twitter, just do more of that thing. If you've posted, like, I don't know, you went on a cycle trip with your best friend and no one likes it, well, maybe don't post so much about that. So I think it's just kind of like iterating and seeing what works. Just post like once a day. And maybe, I don't know, maybe take a Google Doc and write down lots of things that you want to talk about, and then just post them on Twitter, and then get off Twitter if Twitter's too distracting for you.
Yeah. You also mentor founders online, or mentor founders about writing online. And I wanted to mention that as one of your services. When people get started with you, how do you advise them to choose the right platform? Is it based on where their target audience is? Is it based on what formats and styles of content they want to produce?
Yeah, I mean, I think most people already have an idea, like that they want to, say, post on LinkedIn or they want to post on Twitter. I've never really had people that are like, I don't know what platform to post on. Though nowadays, I mean, I guess there's more people checking out Threads, like myself included. But yeah, at the moment, it's more being people are asking about things like what to post, or they know what they want to post, but they want to say like, how does it, will this grab someone's attention, or how would you improve this hook and stuff like that? Because I guess you can have something that's like really interesting to say on social media, but if you just write it as a paragraph, or if you don't write a good hook, again, it's a bit like a newspaper. You have to have like a good headline. Like, I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but I guess thinking on my feet, way back in 1963 JFK assassination, if you had like man shot in Texas, that probably would be a great headline to sum up what the event that happened, if you see what I mean. So yeah, you need to obviously have a good hook and get people interested and in the door before you like get them like reading what else you want to say, basically.
All right. And I've heard a lot of times people say that like the first 1,000 on whatever platform is the hardest part. So what is your advice for folks that are under that threshold? They're trying to push above it. And is it post more? Is it iterate on types of content? Is it get better hooks? What can you do to help those people who are under 1,000 to reach that?
That's a good point. I think it'd be more about things like engagement and like following big accounts and replying, but not replying in like a kind of, super basic, like, great point, John, or whatever. But like there's I guess an example would be there's someone who follows me and I follow them, and I think they've still got like a very small following, but like one time I was asking about something technical, or it might have been about, I don't know, CSS or something, and someone replied like, oh yeah, this is what you want to do. And I was like, oh, cool. And I hit follow, and I didn't care that they had like 100 followers. They were helpful to me. So I think being helpful to people and replying and just being interesting and like showing up in the replies, but don't be, I don't know, you don't want to like reply to everything someone says, because that comes across as a bit of a stalker move. So, but just I would find accounts that you like that are in your niche. So, for instance, if I was in the bootstrapper niche and I just want to build a following, I would like follow other people in this space. And I think that's really important. Who you follow is good, because if you want to get like a grow a following in the entrepreneur space and you're following a bunch of like political accounts or like soccer accounts or things like that, it's kind of just like a waste of your time. So you should be following people that you want to be, that are in your space, and kind of, don't be spending time, I don't know, replying to like sports accounts if you if you want to get like a SaaS following, for instance. So yeah, I think like engaging with people would do a lot. You obviously have to post as well, but I think even if you don't have to be an expert, you could be, say, like if you're learning to code, you could be like documenting how you're learning to code, or you could be saying like, oh hey, I'm a total beginner at Tailwind. This is what I learned today, learning Tailwind, for instance, and people will probably like that. So I don't think it has to be that you're necessarily an expert, but you have to, like, people have to have a reason to follow your account. They're not going to follow it out of like charity or whatever.
All right, one more question about Twitter, and then we'll move on to some of the other stuff you're working on. Since you're a ghostwriter for several clients, I'm not sure how many, but I'm curious about sort of how you handle context switching in that situation, and how your workflow works. So, like, do you write a bunch of tweets for one persona in a couple hours and then move on to the next one, or do you write one for each person every day? How do you handle that? I'm just curious.
Yeah. I like to block off my time, so I'll just like block off a couple of hours and just like write for one person at a time. Yeah, I definitely like, I like my coffee and I like sitting in cafes and just like focusing on that. And yeah, I think it's something I'm going to like, another thing I'm going to do more of from now is like to just block days off to just do one thing. Like, for instance, a week ago, I had a good day where I sold a bunch of newsletter ads. And it's because like, I was like, right, I'm just going to make today a sales day. And I'm just going to like pitch a load of people by cold email, like newsletter ads and ghostwriting. And I just did that for one day and I had really good results. So I think like trying to do less context switching is a good thing. Generally, I just like block out, during my time when I'm writing on someone, I'm not like, checking Twitter or checking social media and stuff. I'm just like focusing on one thing. And yeah, for my other work, I sent the High Signal newsletter on Wednesdays and Fridays. Obviously, I can schedule that. So again, I just kind of like block out time and just like do one thing at a time. But yeah, I mean, I think coming back to an earlier question is I quite like having a variety of things. So I'm not saying you should have like 10 products, but I quite like having like a newsletter and doing ghostwriting, because yeah, it gives me a bit more variety in my week, and I'm not just doing like one thing over and over again.
Right on. Let's talk a little bit about how you used to have a podcast and then switch to the newsletter, because I'm curious as a podcast host, what you found challenging or not just great about the format of interviews with folks. So just as a background, you had the podcast, you started in 2021 and you were interviewing folks who were self-taught developers, right?
Yeah. I started a lot of things. Man, COVID's a blur. I just like, it's really fun doing chats with people like you, because people will be like, in February 2020, you released an ebook about something. I'm like, did I? Oh, I don't know. I guess so. But
you wrote the about page, man. It's on it's your page.
Right. All right. Yeah, that's true. I've done a lot of stuff. Yeah, that sounds about right. I had a podcast for NoCS Degree about finding out if people had learned to code. And I've also done, it's still up. It's a YouTube channel where I was interviewing people about how they made their businesses. So I've kind of done a bit of both of audio and video, and we can in terms of why I'm not doing that, I think really it's I mean, I like both those mediums, but I guess there's a couple of things. Whereas one, you can knock out a lot of blog post interviews a lot quicker than you can with podcasts or videos. So I think the speed of the content creation for a newsletter is one thing. I think two would be things like you have someone on and like you've all geared up to a podcast interview, you're really excited, and then they're like, their car's going by their house or it's super noisy. Sometimes, honestly, it's a bit like not PC to say it, but sometimes people just aren't very interesting guests. So you might have some, or you just don't have a good rapport with them, or I'm being charitable. Maybe they've had a bad day. Maybe they've just been dumped or something, and they're just like not very good speakers. So I think like no one can detect that if you don't have an interesting speaking voice. No one can detect that on a blog post, whereas they can on a podcast. And I guess finally, I think with monetization, it's just it just seems easier to monetize a newsletter with, for instance, adverts. Like at the moment, High Signal newsletter is totally free. I think the newsletter will always be free, but I can have like adverts, and that seems to be an easier sell than, for instance, making like podcast adverts, for instance. But I like podcasts and I like YouTube, but I think it seems to be a harder way to produce content than, like, say, for instance, like there's a guy that's made a kind of widget to make your smartphone like minimal. It's called like Dumb Phone. And like today or yesterday I was like, hey, I'd like to interview you, etc., etc. And I sent him some questions in a Google Doc, and he's already filled them out. And now they're like in my newsletter scheduled for next week. And that whole thing didn't take a lot of time. Whereas for like a podcast, and the editing, I just remembered all the editing that you do as well. So I'm not trying to roast you, man, but it's like I love listening to podcasts, but they just seem to take a lot more to produce, basically.
Definitely agree. The main reason I was curious about it was because the topic seemed like it would really take off at the time when you launched it. So it was the COVID tech boom, all the startups were getting funded, everybody was hiring. You made a podcast about getting in tech without a CS degree. All the ingredients seemed like perfect for it to be a winning show.
Well, I'll just travel back in time now, John, and make a podcast. But no, I'm kidding. I think you're right when I launched in 2019, like the blog No CS Degree, it was good timing because a lot of people were getting into tech. A lot of boot camps were like flourishing. Boot camps were sponsoring the blog posts and stuff like that. So it was definitely like an element of luck, my timing on that.
All right, let's take some quick hit question breaks, and then we will get back into it. So, you're going on holiday. Do you want to go to the mountains or the beach?
Mountains, please.
Me too. Webflow or Framer?
Webflow. It's what I know. Use what you know, basically.
Mm-hmm. Coffee or tea?
Coffee every day. I'm holding up my girlfriend's mug, so you can't tell, but it's coffee. You can believe me.
Cheers. What is the newest or latest app you download on your phone?
Dumb Phone. So it's dumbphone.so, and it's a widget that basically you add it, and you can replace your home screen on your phone to just black, and you have your apps like written out in just plain text. So you might have like banking, social, messages, and it just makes it a lot less like visually appealing. And that means that like you don't want to pick up your phone so much. My girlfriend hates it.
Yeah, the one thing that I did on my holiday was I just like tried to be on the internet as little as possible. The laptop was easy. I just kept it closed the whole time. But the phone was a little bit harder.
Yeah, Yeah.
Let's get into. Oh, I want to go back to the one thing you said about when we were talking about SaaS startups. I've noticed one thing with Paralectir, the company that I'm working for. A lot of our founders come from like years and years of industry experience, and over that time, they've seen this burning problem that they need to solve with technology, and eventually they get to the point where they want to make it a reality. The build time is a lot longer. Usually, they tend to not want to do like the 2-week MVP. They tend to have a very comprehensive idea of the solution that they want to build, and the other group is like the one we talked about, the indie hackers or the bootstrappers that just build on quantity and see what sticks. You seem to fall in the middle. So I'm curious about your ideation and how do you decide to pursue an idea? And the reason I still want to ask this question is because you post a lot of ideas on your Twitter. You share like free business idea, here it is. So yeah, just tell me about why you decide to go after an idea or not.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in the past, I would say I went a lot more on kind of like passion and feelings and just like, oh, I just really want to do this. But that doesn't pay the bills. So I think now it'd be more things like seeing if there's demand for it. I mean, I think that's the number one thing. You have to see if there's demand. One way of doing that is obviously see if something like this exists already and see if you can like make a better version of it. It really freaks me out, the fact that when I go to like my local cafe, there's 100 cafes in Edinburgh, there's 100 cafes in where you live, I guess. No one goes into a cafe and says like, how dare you open this cafe? There's a cafe down the street. You're copying this. I'm going to run and tell them and I'm going to cancel you or whatever. Whereas people do this all the time in the tech world. If you make like a SaaS, it's like, I literally see people on Reddit or Hacker News or whatever saying like, how is this different from, this other app? And it's like, well, think like there's more than one, sneaker brand. There's more than one cafe outlet. There's, it's normal in business to have competition. So I don't think there's anything wrong in going into an area where there's already products. And I think that's probably the safest way. So in terms of ideas, like I did actually, another thing I shipped recently was I made a Webflow job board template. That was based off of my like remote company's job board directory I made a few years ago and I sold. But it's also because I was like, oh, I wanted to do something different in June and I'll make this job board template. But this exists already. Like there's other templates. People are making a SaaS around making a job board. So it's quite a safe decision to make something if other people are doing it. Or for instance, if like 1,000 people a month are searching for like a tool or something, then it's pretty good, or a service, it's pretty like strong indicator that you're going to have customers. So that's the non-romantic answer is do things that people are searching for or that people are doing already, because you know that there's going to be demand there.
Cool. And about the newsletter, what do you think are sort of the hardest and easiest parts of writing and growing a newsletter?
I'd say the easiest parts are most like platforms, you can do it for free. So like obviously I don't use it, but you've got Substack, which you can use for free. ConvertKit, which I do use, just made like a new pricing point where you get 10,000 subscribers for free, which is kind of nuts. And like lots of other ones, Beehive is like 2,500. I think you'll need to check that obviously. But I think the easiest point is it's free to get started. And if you can get like a few thousand subscribers, you can definitely be charging for ads and like, or, promoting, say, another service. If you're, say, like, I don't know, SEO consultant, making a newsletter about SEO, link out to your SEO consultancy every week. It's not complicated. So I think the good thing about newsletters is that. I think also it's like a simple product if you're not like a developer or if you're like just getting into things, it's like if you can edit like, a document online, you can write a newsletter. It's not like a complicated thing where, you just need to be able to write well and write something that people enjoy reading every week. In terms of difficulties, it's definitely got a lot more difficult with things like Twitter and LinkedIn and places, because in the past you used to have a situation where from like the time where I've been a founder, 2019 to maybe 21, 22, you could write on Twitter and be like, hey, I'm interviewing Pete this week and blah, 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 and link to your newsletter or to your podcast. And the Twitter algorithm would be like, fine by me, that's cool. Yeah, a few hundred people or 1,000 people view it and they click on your newsletter. And obviously, as I guess we both know, in Twitter and LinkedIn places nowadays, they really discourage like linking out to another platform. They want you to stay on Twitter or LinkedIn, which makes sense. So it's harder to get newsletters, subscribers on social media. Like most people nowadays will do the thing where they're like, oh, I interviewed Michael about making his dumb phone app. It's in High Signal next Wednesday. Link below, and then you'll put your link to your newsletter in the next comment. And the reason people are doing that is because posts with links get penalized by the algorithms on social media. Yeah, it's harder, I guess, to grow them through social, but it's easy to write them themselves, and it's a very cheap and affordable thing to a business to grow, basically.
Let's dig into that content distribution side a little bit more, because all these platforms, Twitter, LinkedIn, I mean, you can post your long form content there now, right? So is that something that you would do with the content from High Signal newsletter? Like, would you make that a post on LinkedIn, like say a week later, or is there no point in that, in your opinion?
I think it depends on your goal. If you're wanting to grow your Twitter, then posting a lot of content on Twitter will help. But if you want to grow your newsletter, not so much, because I guess like people will be like, oh, well, why sign up for Pete's newsletter? I can just read on Twitter anyway. And B, you can't, like, you're not controlling. The good thing about newsletters is you have that one-to-one relationship with your readers. So, if I send out my newsletter and, IBM send out their newsletter, they won't get top because, they reach in people's email inboxes just the same. So you have a one-to-one relationship. I think they're different things and they're different purposes. And I think, for instance, as well, I think what I like doing is like, I like teasing something about the newsletter content on social. I've done that a lot for the NoCS posts in the past, where I'll have a quote from someone where it might be like, I tripled my salary by learning to code. It's a lot of hard work, but it's the best decision ever, or something like that. And then be like, read Dara's story this week on NoCS, link below. So I think that's maybe a best of both worlds. I mean, but if you purely want to grow on Twitter and you don't have any newsletter goals, then yeah, sure, having a long post of your content would grow your Twitter there, but it's probably not going to grow your newsletter.
Right. I'm curious, since you brought this up a little bit ago, at what level of subscribers did you decide that you could monetize High Signal?
I think it's quite small. Unlike a lot of people in tech and a lot of developers, I really like doing sales. So I can't totally remember the exact number, but I think it's probably quite relatively small, like 300 subscribers or 500 subscribers. And I think I'm very much a monetize early person. Like, I'm a bootstrapper, so it's not like, I can understand the argument if you're like a venture capital startup, you're just focusing on growth, and maybe you've got like imposter syndrome and you're like, oh, I need to have like 10,000 subscribers. It's never too early. I'm glad that I've got a lot of really good, solid readers that check out High Signal. I've got I think it's an easier sell if you've got a lot of top like SaaS founders like I do on my email list, because I guess like the quality of your list is more important when you're monetizing it with ads. So for instance, one scenario, you have like a newsletter with like, I don't know, 100 VCs read it. Everyone from like the top Silicon Valley VCs read a newsletter. Or second newsletter, it's like 20,000 people looking for remote jobs. Which one's going to be the easier one to sell ads for? The one that has the valuable like readership, basically. So yeah, I don't think you have to put off monetizing a newsletter until you get to an arbitrary figure. And you can also do things like you can trade ads with people, or you can like, you don't have to be charging a lot, but you can get something in to like pay for your time. So yeah, I think there's lots of different ways to do it, but I wouldn't wait until I'd say maybe like 500 subs is a good start. But I wouldn't say that you have to have like a huge list until you're getting sponsors, basically.
Got it. And I haven't looked into this in a while, but there are like platforms to get and give sponsorship for newsletters. Do you use any of those, or do you do it all yourself and just outreach?
I mainly do it on outreach just because those kind of platforms don't really pay you very well. So to put it simply, you can, I mean, I guess the thing is, it's sort of like passive income in a way, because if you make a listing on one of those sites, it might take like 5-10 minutes to do that, and then you just wait for people to come in. So I can accept the argument that people are like, oh, well, I don't have to do anything. I'm not doing the outreach. I'm not doing the sales. So you kind of pay a price for that, in that you won't get so much for each ad. But I like doing sales, so I'm happy to do that. And then that way I get paid more. I'd argue it's also good doing sales because you've got a one-to-one relationship with someone, rather than you're like on some like platform like Newsletter Ad Exchange or whatever. You don't really have like a relationship with those people, whereas you do if you're selling ads to someone. And yeah, I mean, I've used them sometimes. I would use them maybe if I, as backup, for instance, but like personally, I prefer to sell them myself.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the future of writing online, and then we'll wrap things up. So we talked about replies earlier, and I wanted to get your take on the automated AI replies on X and LinkedIn. Is there anything good there that folks should look for?
I'm 100% against AI. I don't know. I think it's just like you go on social media to follow a specific person, and you want to get, like, if I'm following you, I want to get what you think about things. I'm not by any means anti-AI. I think AI is good for lots of things, and it's good, for instance, like doing research. If I want to write a blog post about, I don't know, like developer salaries in like Chicago, I can like get AI to find out how much those salaries are, and I can make a blog post and stuff. That's a good use of AI, but I think AI kind of like faking communication between different humans is not good. And I think it's just something that's quite noticeable as well. So I would always recommend a ghostwriting client to not use AI replies, because it just doesn't come across well. It comes across as very, like, I guess, fake and insincere, and like human relationships are really important. So I think having a insincere message to another human being is like, it's not going to build a good relationship between those people, and those relationships can be really important. I get a lot of ghostwriting clients from word of mouth, or people that have been following me for a long time. So if I was just doing like an AI reply to people, then it was kind of like wreck that exactly.
Yeah. This is kind of a tangent, but I've always wanted an AI that prompted me instead of me prompting it. Like if there was a bot that like looked at my last month of tweets and looked at like the most popular ones, and then also looked at like what I engaged with, what my network's most popular tweets were. And then it just asks me questions that my answer would be the tweet that I post. Like it's prompting me with ideas instead of me prompting it. Maybe I'll build it someday.
Yeah, go for it. You can also, on Twitter, you can search for something like a person, like at Pete Codes, and then it's like min_faves, colon, and like, I know, 100, and you can find all my tweets that have got like over 100. So there's lots of things you can do in Twitter yourself, but that does sound good as well.
Super. Let's talk about algorithm changes. So we did a little bit before, but do you pay attention to them closely? Does it impact how you write tweets or LinkedIn posts or anything?
Yeah, it does in a way. I think what I said about earlier about like you don't like posts with links do a lot worse. Yeah, so I do pay attention to them, but I think as well, I don't think you should always be like a slave to the algorithm. I think people get quite annoyed if you're always doing like engagement bait. And I think doing things like, what's better, macro PC and stuff like that, and these kind of bottom feeder kind of questions, they can just annoy a lot of people after a while. So I think like you can totally do things like that, or you can do something that's gonna like, say something inflammatory that's gonna like annoy people, but then you get known as the guy who just posts rage bait or whatever, or I don't think it's great for your reputation. But I mean, I do pay attention to the algorithm, but I wouldn't say I'm like a slave to it, if you see what I mean. So I think for one example, like LinkedIn generally likes longer posts than on Twitter. So if I'm posting on LinkedIn, I'll write something longer. But there's also a kind of trend in the last year where lots of people find out that a photo with a post on LinkedIn did better than just text. But everyone just started posting like, a selfie of them on a hike or something when they're writing about, TypeScript, which just is like completely irrelevant. So right. I think that got overdone. So I think you can like pay attention to it, but don't let it like dictate everything you do, basically.
Yeah, and the swipeable posts on LinkedIn have gotten out of hand. Like, I don't know if you follow a lot of marketers, but I have seen people upload like 75 slide PDFs on there.
Yeah.
You're like, what? Who has
the time? Yeah.
Yeah. It's wild, but it gets engagement from a certain audience, I guess.
I think stuff like that is good, but you don't want to. I think doing stuff like that in moderation, maybe. Like, there's a few people I know that do like SEO tips, but it's like 10 slides. So that's like that's enough for your attention. You learn something that's good, but yeah, 75 this is pretty wild.
Yeah, boggles the mind. All right, let's wrap up with some practical tips maybe we haven't shared yet. The saying is that people overestimate what they can achieve in a day and underestimate what they can do in a year, or something like that. If founder comes to you, what are some like practical goals that you would set for them if they're starting pretty low, I don't know, a couple hundred followers on X or LinkedIn? What are sort of achievable in 3 to 6 months for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd focus more on like the input. It does come down to sort of like what you're posting about, and there's people that like I think I tripled their following in a few months, but they're doing really cool shit with AI. You know what I mean? So I think like I can help someone grow, but there needs to be something there already, if you see what I mean. And I think, I've got a buddy, Julian, who does like a SEO agency. And I remember him saying ages ago, like, I work with different clients, but they have to have something there already, because you can't grow from nothing, if you see what I mean, or it's a lot harder to grow from nothing. Yeah, I think just posting consistently is the way to go. And honestly, it depends on the account and and what they're posting. I'd say if someone's like just got out of YC, it's going to be easier to grow their account than someone that has maybe, I don't know, like something that's not so buzzy or not so trendy or whatever. So I think it sort of depends on the client, like how fast they can grow. But I think I think the number one thing for any social media is just like post a lot and be interesting, and have an account that people want to follow and that's worth following.
For sure. So would you say to them, like, you shouldn't set a goal of reaching 1,000 followers in 3 months. You should set a goal of, posting twice a day for the next 60 days instead. If it's X on LinkedIn, that's excessive. But
I think that sounds about right. I mean, I think it's about like I think similar to your quote, the kind of impatient with action and patient with results. You can control if you post twice a day, you can't control exactly how many followers you're going to get. So I think being consistent, and I think once the more you post as well, the more that people will like, that you'll learn what people like about your content, and then you can so it's like, oh, people really like my post about, I don't know, like growing a newsletter. Okay, I'll post like once a week about like a growth tip for a newsletter, or like people really like this like hack I found for like getting good SEO backlinks. Okay, I'll do more content about that. So, but it's kind of like if you never post, you'll never iterate on that. And I think I can't remember but there's a book about psychology I read a while ago, and that had a kind of an art class, and I think they're split into two different groups. And one class was like, one class was told you have to make the best piece of art you can, and the other class was you have to produce a piece of art every day for a month. And that group produced the better art at the end of the month because they're constantly iterating and improving, versus like, honestly, this is a bit of a rant, but when I work on clients, they're like, oh, I have to just make the perfect tweet and we're going to spend like 3 weeks working on it. And it's like, it's not like you're not making like a piece of Renaissance art. You need to like, you need to get stuff out there and throw stuff out the walls and see what sticks, really.
Awesome. Well, we're out of time, but thank you so much, Pete. Where should folks follow along to hear more of your thoughts on writing online and being a founder?
Yeah, thanks a lot, John. It was a lot of fun. You can find me, Pete Codes, on all the social networks. I've got a personal blog that's petecodes.io, and I've got a newsletter, highsignal.io, and that's for Bootstrapper news that I send twice a week. And yeah, that's about everything.
Awesome. I'll put all the links in the show notes for this show. Once again, thank you so much for your time. There's a lot we could have gone into, but maybe we'll do it another time as well.
Yeah, I had a blast, John. Thanks a lot.